Hello, School Transportation Nation. We're back for another episode brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. And a green tip today from First Student, the leader in student transportation. Also, special guest Tod Eskra from American Student Transportation Partners, who is the owner of Krise Transportation out in Pennsylvania. So, going to be talking to him a little bit about what's going on there in PA. Before we jump into that, let's talk to you about TransFinder's Quartet. That's 4 solutions that will keep your team singing from the same songbook to bring the music to your ears. That's Route Finder Plus, the lightning fast browser-based routing solution that creates the safest and most efficient routes and bus stops. Stop Finder, the industry-leading parent app that shows where students are in real time. Wayfinder, the driver app for drivers and substitutes. And Viewfinder, which allows authorized users to monitor the entire operation. These award-winning solutions work in harmony with each other. They will cover all your district's needs. You can email them at getplus@transfinder.com or call them at 800-373-3609 and tell them you want to hear about that quartet. You'll be singing in no time. All right, bringing on my editorial, specialist, always in the know, fingers on the pulse of the industry, Ryan Gray. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks, Tony. It's always great to be back with the nation.
Excellent. So Ryan and I were like, all right, what do we talk about this episode? And Ryan brings up a barn burner of a story in South Carolina around special needs. And just coming off the TSD conference, Ryan, I think it's just really kind of shocking, the story you told me, because I wasn't even aware. You want to enlighten the audience on kind of what happened?
Sure. Well, this goes back to 2018. So we're talking pre-pandemic. A little girl, she was on the school bus. She has autism spectrum disorder, basically nonverbal. I think, if I remember correctly, I think she was about 8 years old at the time. And video now has surfaced from an incident that happened. There was a lawsuit. You see where I'm going with this, Tony. There was this big case. It's been settled. Now the media got hold of the video and we saw it. So Queen City News in Charlotte, North Carolina, actually did an investigative report last week. And I came upon it by reading a newsletter that I get from Dick Fisher, who's a consultant in the industry, longtime expert, pupil transporter, trainer. He had it in his digest email and I clicked on it. His heading was like, every driver should watch this, show this to your entire staff. So of course I watched it. It was a 30-minute special investigative report. And like I said, this happened back in 2018. Essentially on video, you see over about a 45-minute route, this little girl who's strapped in her seat is being attacked viciously by a little boy who's sitting about a row in front of her and to her left. So she's on the right side of the bus. This other child's on the left. He was I think he was a few years older. And he was watching the driver. And when the driver wasn't looking, he'd go back there and hit her, kick her, bite her. One point takes her head and slams it against the seat back. This goes on. She's crying, and the bus driver, you can hear the bus driver turn saying, "What's wrong, honey? Why are you crying? What's going on?" At one point, he actually gets out to get one of the children who is riding a wheelchair off the bus and tries to console the little girl. And she's crying and, of course, can't say what's going on. So anyways, I mean, I'm watching this going, my gosh, like you mentioned, Tony, coming out of TSD, we feel good about the training. We feel good about the networking and some positive conversations taking place. And then granted, this happened 4 years ago, but it just, what's to keep this from happening right now? And is this happening right now? The long and short of it is that once the little girl was brought back on the bus after school, it shows the teacher dropping her off and talking about how she was really crying a lot. And the bus driver says, yeah, she was doing that this morning. Is that normal? And the teacher's like, yeah, it happens with her. And then the girl's visibly, you can see her, she's getting on the bus and she doesn't want to get on the bus. Sure enough, they head home. The same thing happens in reverse. The child starts attacking her. Come to find out, this other child was, emotionally disturbed. There was some kind of behavioral condition issue going on with that child, should have been restrained, wasn't. So then you think about like, well, where's the IEP for this kid? Evidently, there were 15 notes about this child's behavior that the school bus driver was never made aware of. Evidently, it was a substitute driver. Again, another, instance where we hear of a substitute driver walking into a situation. And first of all, you have to think, are you oblivious to not knowing what's going on behind you to that degree? But there was no attendant on the bus. So that was another thing that came out. The parents, they get the girl at the end of the day. The dad shows the dad get her, and he's like, "Wow, what happened today?" And the driver's like, "I don't know. She was been crying all day." Well, it only takes a matter of minutes. They get the girl home, and they see bruises and bite marks all over her body. I mean, we'll put this video up on our website so everyone can watch. It's about 30 minutes long.
Little graphic though, Ryan. It feels like just really hard to watch.
But people have to see this. People have to see this. I mean, it's, we do this for the kids. All you out there in the nation are doing what you do for the kids. We got to remember all of the talk about driver shortages and funding and electric buses and whatnot. That aside, comes back to the children. And it just breaks your heart to see a child go through this. So, obviously the parents call the school district, they escalate it, and they start getting stonewalled. So anyways, this investigative report by Queen City News is really good. We'll definitely get that up on the website so you guys can watch it. But you better believe that I've reached out to both Chesterfield County School District, which happens to have a new superintendent. The old superintendent now works at Kershaw County School District. I've reached out to him. I've reached out to the new superintendent at Chesterfield. We're going to, get these folks to talk. They didn't want to talk on the investigative report. They're probably not going to want to talk to School Transportation News. But, these are the kind of things where we need to talk about lessons learned, and again, watching those segments of the depositions were just, and granted, I know how TV production works. You find the most scintillating tidbits. So there's probably more to this story, but still, it's moot. You look at what happened to this little girl. I think she's now 12 years old. The mom talks about how she just completely lost trust in the school district. She now drives her daughter to school. Rural South Carolina. It's just sad. And, it's something that needs to have a light shown on it, even more so than what the folks at Queen City News did. Again, a really good report. And, the family got an attorney. They won the settlement. They sued Chesterfield County School District, as well as South Carolina Department of Education. I actually texted a representative at South Carolina Department of Education before we went on this podcast and was told, hey, the South Carolina Department of Education, they're named in lawsuits like this, but really said, hey, these kind of instances, that is on the district. Yes, South Carolina owns the buses, maintains them, and they provide training. But as we see in this report, training that was being done at the South Carolina Department of Education, one of their bus driver trainers was aware something was going on and was trying, and you see her being deposed, and she's talking about this was elevated to her, and she was reaching out to the special needs director at Chesterfield County and just wasn't getting responses, was kind of getting the runaround. And then you see in the deposition where the plaintiff's attorney tells her that the very day that the special needs director emailed her and said, well, yeah, we're looking at this just in case something happens. That was the very day that this girl got attacked. And you just see the bus driver trainer from SCDE just go, I'm just now putting this together. I feel a little sick, is what she says. Probably more than a little. But, I think it's a lesson learned, kind of one of those things, by the grace of God, go I. I think that, everyone out there in the nation, they're dealing with so much every day. And unfortunately, even in the best districts, things like this can happen and do happen. So we as an industry, and we here at School Transportation News, need to try to shine a light on that, to get that word out. So just, it's that diligence that we need to remind ourselves day in and day out, adhere to the training, be a part of those discussions with special needs, share the information about students, the bus drivers need to know about the students that they're driving, especially when you're talking about special needs routes. There's just so much to unpack there, but I definitely wanted to talk about that a little bit on this podcast. Really, really, really sad stuff.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Ryan. Like I said, I'm getting the account from you on everything that happened there, and it's gut-wrenching to hear that. And it always comes back to, is the training there? Can we stay consistent, right? TSD, like you said, we're dealing with some of the best trainers around, but we have to be 100% all the time. And there has to be transparency. There has to be awareness of this. And clearly there is multiple stakeholders, the superintendent, special needs director, transportation director, all of them were involved by not responding or not giving it the need. And again, we don't know every tidbit, but like you said, it just really puts a bright light on the importance of, we've talked about before, checking your cameras, checking the cameras randomly on special needs routes specifically because these students cannot speak for themselves. You can see when there's behavioral, let's call it just, it's unusual behavior, right? Something out of the ordinary that the student is expressing. Student was crying. Driver's just like, oh, they're just crying. They're just a crybaby.
Why?
Then they're crying again.
Yeah.
They're visibly scared to get on the bus. Clearly an acute case of being bullied by another special needs student who clearly was doing things to harm this student. And obviously, when you get your child home as a parent, your heart just sinks. You're like, oh my God, I can imagine what those parents were thinking.
No.
And they want justice. And I think to your point though, yes, it shouldn't have happened. Yes, it's egregious and horrible, but how do we prevent it from happening again? How do we enlighten the industry as this industry source and really bubble this up to the top? It's not happy. Nobody wants this to be public. Nobody likes to talk about this. But at the end of the day, it's what's best for the industry so we can improve as an industry. And everybody who's listening to this should pause for a second and be like, hey, could this happen to us? Yes, absolutely it could. But you have to put those kind of checks and balances in place to have all the stakeholders aware of this. So I think it's a great lesson learned, Ryan, to kind of like suggest getting this out to the community and having a bigger discussion about it. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more stories on the website, maybe even a conversation at the conference.
Absolutely.
Kind of just bring this forward. I can totally see it.
Oh yeah, I'm already, I've been, my wheels have already been spinning for TSD next November. But certainly it's like, yeah, how do we, especially, one of the things we see so often, some of these incidents happen and everyone kind of lawyers up and there's a lawsuit. No one wants to talk. And, now that it's settled and it comes to light, and again, the investigative reporting of the news agency out there that did the Freedom of Information Act and sued to get video and whatnot so that they can there locally spread the news so that we can then catch it nationally and then we can bring it to all of you out there in the nation at our conferences. Let's talk about it. Let's just do what we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Well, it's embarrassing for the school district. It's damning, right? It just looks horrible on them and it reflects on their community.
And it reflects on the industry. I mean, you have a mother who's saying she's never going to ride a school bus again. Okay, well, here we are. We're talking about, ridership and, coming out of the pandemic, ridership levels were down. Ridership levels were going down before that. If everyone checks out my column from the November issue in the magazine, this has been trending down and we're, frankly, kind of lying to ourselves as an industry talking about 25 million kids on school buses. That doesn't exist anymore. It's like 15, 20 years old data. It's just not the case. And why? Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's the driver shortage and there's, these transportation network companies and alternative transportation, non-yellow school bus. There's funding cuts. The list goes on and on and on. But it comes back to, if there's things that the industry is doing or not doing that's helping that bleed, so to speak, of kids not riding the school bus, that's a huge problem, and that's something that the industry can do something about if they can't do anything about the economy, or they're trying to compete with Amazon and Uber and all these other companies for drivers or for technicians. But it just comes back to the training and the collaboration, communication, just to do the absolute best we can for the kids, so that, again, things like this hopefully, are a thing of the past. Not sure that will ever happen, but definitely it's something that we can never lose sight of, and we always have to strive for, at least.
Yeah. All right. Shifting gears, Ryan, want to drop a green tip on you from First Student, the leader in student transportation. Guys, if you're one of the winners of the EPA's Clean School Bus Lottery, will you know where to start? Will you know if you have the right bus and battery for your geography and terrain? Do you know how to design your infrastructure? Have you talked to your public utility? First Student leads the way in school bus electrification. With over 150 EVs deployed and more than 300 ordered, they have launched an EV consulting service to help school districts like you with assessments, partnering with utilities, total cost of ownership, and project management. You can learn more at electrification at firststudentinc.com. That's electrification at firststudentinc.com. So Ryan, just kind of shifting gears, I know there was a Senate committee hearing and they were talking a lot about yellow school buses and the EPA program as one of the elements of that discussion, which is a multi-hour, congressional kind of oversight on what is happening with the program. Where are the opportunities? Where are the areas there are deficiencies? And there was a representative from Highland Electric there fielding questions from that committee. And one of the big things that were asked were, where are there opportunities where we can really get this out to communities that are deserving of this funding, and what were kind of some of the hangups? And one of the things that were brought forward was scrappage. So a lot of people feel like they don't have the buses that met the scrappage requirement to apply, so they just don't apply at all. So, they're putting a barrier up, and I know they're trying to take, as they say, dirty diesel off the road, right? I guess if they're older of a certain age, and they have to basically dispose of them. So it becomes a big issue for people that don't have buses that are older. They don't meet the criteria. So that came up in the meeting. And I know you and I talked a lot as well about, it's great to get all this money flooded into the system, but how are they going to get the infrastructure, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The committee hearing you're talking about was environmental and public works. And you had said that there was a representative from Highland Electric on there talking about school buses specific. Obviously, a lot of conversation about EPA and that scrappage. But, a lot of the conversation also was talking about charging and, public charging. There's a grant out there right now that's actually looking at putting charging at school sites. That's from the Department of Energy. There is, Tesla right now is trying to do public charging. Right now, that's what we need as an industry. We've written so many articles. Just you look back at all the various electric articles we wrote in 2022. One of the overriding themes was you got to get the infrastructure in place before you get the school buses. Here we are, Tony. We just had, nearly $1 billion is being awarded as we speak to bring buses in. And, we don't have the necessary infrastructure to support them. A friend of mine in the Environmental Law and Policy Center, Susan Mudd, who some of you out there might know, she's a big electric school bus advocate. We've had her speak at our STN Expo Indianapolis and at STN Expo Reno. She's a big advocate, especially in the Midwest, for electric school buses. She sent me a really interesting graphic. We were talking about next summer and with the Green Bus Summit, what we're going to be doing. And she was mentioning to me this very thing, the issues with all of these school buses that are in the pipeline. You see all the latest quarterly results from all the different public school bus OEMs talking about the pipeline, about the buses on order. she shared this graphic from Clean Energy Works, which is basically an advocate for inclusive utility development across the nation for electric vehicles. And so they have one graphic of the United States, and it shows kind of color-coded the different states that received electric school bus awards or are receiving from EPA. And of course, the darker the shade, the more buses, up to about 185, down to the lowest shade of blue being one bus. So a lot of the middle part of the country, maybe only a couple buses are awarding the entire state, which is kind of odd too, because one of the big criteria from the EPA rebate was the disadvantaged areas and rural, based upon the U.S. Census. So of course, as you know, I'm sure you're not surprised, California is dark blue, New York, South Carolina got a lot of buses, Texas, Illinois, Michigan, Georgia, Louisiana. But then Clean Energy Works has another graphic for an overlay showing the map of utility programs that are make ready for EV fleets that can cover the infrastructures that's needed by these buses that are being funded. And essentially, New York and California, a little bit in Michigan, but a lot of the states have, you can count, shovel ready or even make ready, they're ready to go now, infrastructure in place on one hand, maybe with one or two digits. So that's a big problem. I see it as a problem. It was interesting. I spoke with a gentleman from Illinois today who said, he's looking at it as an opportunity. Tim Farquhar, he's the superintendent of Williamsfield Schools. That's about it's in rural middle of Illinois near Peoria. And some of you might know the name because he's developed a consortium of schools. So he's went out there to different rural school districts around him and said, hey, we need electric buses, but we can't do it alone. We're too small. We don't have the big utilities in our backyards. So he developed this coalition, basically. It's called Bus to Grid. And so he's working with co-op utilities in the area. He's brought together about a dozen school districts to try to leverage purchasing power, to try to pool their resources for construction and working with the utilities so they can set rates and get shovel-ready projects going. He's a big, advocate in repowering right now. Really, doing some really innovative stuff at that rural small district level, which is 2/3 of the nation, right? Not everybody is Los Angeles Unified or Boston Public Schools, Miami-Dade, New York City that are pledging to go, completely electric in the next 10, 15 years. The majority of districts out there are 10, 15 buses. And you think, oh, well, with all this money, if they're disadvantaged areas, rural, they should be able to get that like that. But not so fast. These districts are smaller. They don't have the new fad right now, having these sustainability directors lead the charge and do the grant writing and do all the project management necessary to get these construction projects off the ground. But so I was talking to Tim about that, and I said, isn't it disconcerting to you a little bit? I mean, especially then you factor in the supply chain problems and folks talking about how it's taking us, 6-8 months longer than normal, at least on average, to get new bus orders. And he said, I'm looking at it as an opportunity. He believes in, pressure makes the diamond, right? You have too many excuses. You're gonna obfuscate. You're gonna delay. You're gonna procrastinate. He said the time is now. If anything, that's the opportunity. If the buses are going to be not coming as soon. Well, if you don't have the infrastructure, get it started. Yeah, maybe you won't have it completely ready once those buses show up, but get started. You got to get started somehow. So, talking to Tim, he's got an innovative program he's running out there in Illinois, hoping to get him to our conferences this summer. And he can spread some more information about what he's doing. Because again, I think it's really great to hear from those small districts and those rural districts who are really wrapping their heads around EV and how to make it work.
Excellent. Yeah, good conversation, Ryan. All right, guys, talking to Tod Eskra at American Student Transportation Partners coming up next. All right, School Transportation Nation, excited to bring to the stage Tod Eskra. He is the President and Chief Growth Officer at American Student Transportation Partners out in Pennsylvania. Tod, welcome, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony. It's been a while since I've seen you, but looking forward to having this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tod and I knew each other from his previous life in school transportation, and he's kind of come back to us, which, you can't stay away from school transportation. That's how it works. So I saw that ASTP made you their president and chief growth officer. So, good decision, I'm sure there. And want to just kind of get a little feel for the audience on who are you guys? I know it's a conglomeration of industry people that have come together to put together this company, and you acquired a company called Krise Transportation about 18 months ago in Pennsylvania, about 300 buses, and want us to give us a sense of like who you are, how did the company come together, and kind of where has it gone in the last 18 months?
That's a great question. I mean, the cool thing is I was actually out of student transportation for a few years, and Pete Pearson, David White, and some other real kind of deep domain expertise in the student transportation world have kind of put this thing together as ASTP. They found a great partner in Tim Krise, who's got a great reputation in the business himself. And they said, hey, at the end of the day, we're looking for a president, a chief growth officer to come in and take a look at how do we build this business? How do we evangelize some of the great things that we're doing as a leadership team? And I joined the team about, only a few months ago. I've been on since August. And it's been nothing but a wild ride. We partnered with Tim back in April of 2021. And Tim was running about 200 buses at that time. And as a kind of an entrepreneur out there running that 300 bus fleet, we put some structure, gave him some additional capital, some support out there. And we helped Tim grow that business from 2021 to today to over 1,000 vehicles in his fleet.
Yeah, so that's pretty amazing, and that's a fast growth trajectory. And I can only imagine if you had 200 to 300 buses and you go to 1,000, you got to hire a lot more drivers to fill those seats. And what does that look like for you guys? How have you guys kind of dealt with the challenge of the driver shortage as you've kind of gone through this hyper growth?
Yeah, I think we've got the same challenges as everybody else out there because as ASTP, we're looking for partners, just not in the state of Pennsylvania, but we're looking at 7 to 10 state range for other partners that look like Tim, that have the same culture, the same mission, vision, and values, and run a really solid business. And so we're seeing this across the country as we go through it. So I don't think it's unique to us. One of the things that we've been trying to do is take a look at how can we make a real easy, as we bring all of our new drivers on board and we get that candidate pool coming through the process, how do we make it really easy for them to do business? And, one of the things that we did was sit in a couple of the terminals, watch the candidate pools come through and really start to make it, what's that user experience and how do we make it really super easy for them to come in, go through the process, have a great experience, right? And then that kind of starts the whole being a part of our mission, vision, and values and making it more of a career path and less as just a kind of a paycheck. And that's helped us out. David White, who's our CEO, is really big on solving for R²E, which is recruiting, retention, and engagement. And as we're talking about bringing in drivers and how do we make sure that we have enough, we've got to make sure once we bring them in, they're engaged and we can retain them. One of the most creative things that we have done is our hero bus. And Tony, I think that you've gotten an opportunity to maybe even see it. It's super cool. We took a route bus. We put a full-on podcast studio in there and really to focus on the true heroes of our business, which are the school bus drivers. What's been really super neat is bringing the drivers in. They've all got really great stories to share. And sitting them down in the bus, and who's driving our hero bus is Audrey Fish. She's our director of communications. She's got some TV experience, so she can really kind of push and pull and get really good stories out of the bus drivers. And it's been a fantastic experience. we've leveraged that going to, book fairs. We go to drop them off at our local terminals. And we're actually going to expand that more as we get those great stories. Our idea when we start to do the retention and engagement piece, we're going to start pumping all of that video and all those podcasts and all that content out into our driver rooms through big, plasma screen TVs, so all the drivers can start to see, hey, gosh, that's a fantastic story. I want my story on there. What can I do? And then we'll bring that hero bus out to that terminal. So it's been a really good experience for us.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned that because I know we did a story on stnonline.com on the Heroes Bus. So if you guys want to check that out, it is on our website. So great nugget there. And yeah, what a creative idea to kind of take something that you have in-house, turn it into a mechanism like that. And I know when we spoke, you guys got a lot of local media coverage. And I know I've talked to a lot of other transportation professionals. Whenever you're able to access local media and amplify the need for drivers, recruitment or at least applications seem to rise when local television media is involved. Is that pretty much what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got really a heck of an asset with Audrey on our team because she does have experience in local media and being able to kind of create that press book and be able to go out and talk to the local media outlets. And it's interesting because we've had similar reporters come out and do the story over and over at multiple locations. And every time we do it, we get such a great response from it. Get a good response from people coming into the terminal. Hey, I saw you guys on the news. I'm interested to be a part of that. Seems like you guys are doing things a little bit differently to be able to kind of motivate and inspire your employees. And we want to be a part of that. So we're getting good results.
Great. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. So you go from 200-300 buses to 1,000 buses. What does that kind of look like from a standpoint of investing in technologies also to address driver shortage, right? Or maybe safety. What have you done, or what's the culture ASCP has brought to Krise Transportation in terms of kind of raising their game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that Tim has done by building his business is he's got a great brand reputation. And again, as we're going out into different markets, that's the kind of prototype that we're looking for. Putting some structure around Tim has been around people, process, and technology. As Tim kind of running that business, we've put a little bit more of a management around him to supplement what's going on there. We've taken a look at kind of the back office piece from an applicant tracking system. How do we get our candidates through the funnel a little bit better? Took a look at our payroll and our ERP. How do we make that a little bit more efficient? And it's been working out extremely well for us. The other thing that we're doing, which is helped us grow the business with Tim, is leveraging that reputation, but also using some data mining and some outbound marketing to be able to drive some of those new opportunities to create the opportunities to grow the business itself.
That's great. Yeah, wonderful to hear that. It's always good to kind of have creative process whenever you're looking at a business like that and come up with some creative solutions to address some of the larger challenges that you face. What's the future for Krise Transportation? Obviously, ASCP is kind of almost like a holding company, and you guys, you're the chief growth officer. So I can only imagine you're looking to grow your network. If there's anybody else out there looking for an exit, you're out there looking to buy, right? There's a lot of M&A going on these days in the market.
That is absolutely true. Right now, we've identified 7 states that we feel are really good market states for us. They're contiguous to Pennsylvania and the upper Midwest. And again, as we go through and we're identifying those potential partners, we want to make sure that they're best in class. They've got a really good plan in place to grow that business. But also, Tony, I think one of the things that's really important to us is to find those businesses that have similar culture, mission, vision, and values. Because as we bring those new partners on board, we want to make sure that they're a good match for us. And that's what we found in Tim in Pennsylvania. So that's the model that we're trying to replicate in multiple states right now. Ultimately, our goal is to work with our partners to really build these enduring businesses together.
Excellent. And then in terms of just your previous life and your previous experience, is there anything you've seen in the last couple of months now working at ASTP and Krise? Is there anything like you found like, wow, I think that there's an areas we can improve on and make the business even better? Like, is there anything like you've glommed onto that you thought, here's an opportunity?
Yeah, you know what? Again, another great question. I think one of the things that we're starting to see is it kind of goes back to the driver recruitment and retention and driver shortage on the CDL side. We're starting to see school districts open up and other potential partners look at how do you leverage some of the special education transportation by leveraging those vans instead of going into just doing the big buses and identifying how can you maybe carve out some of that and leverage the vans, because at that point, you don't have to have a CDL and we can get them trained and up and pretty quickly transporting those students. And we've taken a look at how do we do route analysis? How do we actually figure out, is there a way to reduce the fleet mix from some of the larger buses into those vans? And it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and when you refer to vans, it could be type A school buses or it could be non-yellow assets, right? So we've seen definitely the advent of more alternative transportation or TNC type of models enter the market. We just had the Transporting Students with Disabilities and Special Needs Conference, and there was a plethora of different companies that are offering that type of service as a supplement for the driver shortage and also use cases of special needs transportation, McKinney-Vento. There's a few different use cases we see, and the growth and the need seems to be never ending.
I would agree with that 100%. We're seeing it, and at the school district level, we're starting to see the acceptance of, hey, at the end of the day, if we can actually build a good business case to show you that the service delivery model might be a little bit better, to where you kind of pull those students out, put them into vans or the smaller buses, and it's alleviated some of that driver shortage friction that we're seeing.
Well, excellent. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and great to see you again, and glad you're back in the industry, and we really look forward to seeing all the good things you're doing at Krise Transportation, and hopefully we'll see in those extra 7 states what happens next, right?
Absolutely. Tony, I really appreciate it. It's good to see you, my friend, and thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure, Todd. Take care, bud.
All right, take care.
Hey, special thanks to Todd and Ryan for jumping on the podcast. Always great having a nice conversation with you guys. Lots of good information today. Special thanks to our episode sponsors, TransFinder and First Student. We appreciate you guys. Couldn't do it without you. Also, guys, visit stnonline.com for the very latest in everything happening in the school transportation industry. Make sure and save the dates also for STN Expo in the summer. We've got Green Bus Summit also attached to that, which is June 2nd through the 6th. In Indianapolis, and STN Expo in Reno, which is July 14th through the 19th. So guys, save the dates. Make sure you make it out in the summer to one of our STN Expos. We'd love to have you be there. Also learn all about that green energy with the Green Bus Summit. Go to stnexpo.com for all the latest and greatest. Remember, guys, you can download, share the podcast, stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. We love you, nation. We'll see you next week.